Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back again, and today I once again want to cover another weirdo in the underground hip hop community. I know, shocking. Definitely a topic that I've never covered before. But here's the thing over the past couple years that I've been covering the underground scene, I've started to learn that there's really levels to this shit. No two weirdos are alike, they all have their own fascinating quirks that make them stand out. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, let me explain. Because on the bottom floor of the quote unquote underground scene, you got people like your cousin Greg, who made a SoundCloud account when he was 18 years old, put out like 3 songs, and then got into opiates and started being a weirdo. Definitely degenerate behavior, but not really anything worth covering. But then on the other end of things, you got somebody like the Island Boys, who are two complete freaks who definitely should have never been able to make their way into the public eye in any other era of human history, but thanks to the internet, well, here they are. I mean, these guys have no talent, they have no skill, and their entire rise to fame was built off of antics and, well, basically just the way that they looked, which was extremely goofy, even by SoundCloud rapper standards. And of course, when your entire career is built off of nothing at all, it's not going to be long before people start to lose interest in you. So you're going to have to continually one up yourself time and time again to gain people's attention back. And oftentimes, people pick really weird ways to do so. I mean, there's a reason why the Island Boys are two of the most covered artists on the internet at this point, and while I do definitely find them fascinating, I kind of want to look at the flip side of that. Artists who have all the talent in the world, all the potential, and a very solid fan base behind them, but for one reason or another, never managed to make it to the mainstream. Whether it's because they gain an ego, they start spending their money in the wrong places, they get addicted to drugs, or, well, the main topic of today's video, people who just happen to be extremely mentally ill and end up fucking up everything because of that. And in this realm of the underground scene, some of the all-time champions are people like Space Ghost Perp, Ruben Slick, I guess you could say Viper, but honestly he's not that influential. But the prior two definitely left a massive mark on underground hip-hop, were extremely influential at the prime of their career, only to eventually fall off and completely go off the rails. I mean, at this point, Space Ghost Perp is basically known for being the biggest schizo in the underground scene, even worse than Kanye on a good day, and, well, worse than basically anybody on a bad day. The guy's very racist. However, as bad as Space Ghost Perp is, I think that we can go further. I think that we can dig deeper. And if you continue to go down that rabbit hole of degeneracy, you're eventually going to find the topic of today's video, an artist who goes by the name of Diamonds on My Dick. Yeah, that's right. The guy's name is Diamonds on My Dick. But for today's video, we're simply going to call him Dick Diamonds because it's a lot easier to say. Okay? Right. Now, if you've never heard of this artist before, it's actually your lucky day because honestly, you're probably a more mentally stable person than me, but also, this is really the first time that I'm deep diving into him myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had heard of Dick Diamonds before here and there, but I never really realized the level of degeneracy that he was really on. But before we get into how weird of a guy he is, why don't I give you a bit of a crash course on why he even matters in the first place? Because after all, like I said, a random underground weirdo with no fame doesn't matter, so this man must have had some level of relevancy at some point in history. And that point in history would be right around 2016 to 2017, at the ripe old age of 25. Definitely Unk status, because Diamonds on My Dick was actually born all the way back in 1992 in Virginia. And this was definitely an instance of being in the right place at the right time, because after all, during the early 2010s, the Virginia scene, while being very small, was actually pretty poppin' when it comes to the underground. With a couple big names coming out of there like Little Tracy, and more importantly for the purposes of today's video, Black Kray, who surprisingly is actually blood cousins with Dick Diamonds, or at least that's what people say online. I'm not really sure if it's 100% true, considering many different rappers will call their friends their cousin, even though they're not actually related. But considering how truly off the rails Diamonds on My Dick has gotten in recent years, I would think if they weren't actually related, Black Kray would have said something at this point. So there's a pretty good chance that they're actually blood related. Yeah, that's right. You guys have been asking for a Black Kray video for months and months, and today I'm giving you a treat, the more talented of the two. Okay, I wouldn't go that far, but surprisingly, Diamonds on My Dick wasn't a bad rapper when he first started off. I would describe his music as somewhere between emo rap and plug and B, which sounds like two genres that should never mix, but surprisingly, it actually works pretty well together. He also would run with that entire vamp aesthetic pretty early on. Although he definitely wasn't the first one to do it, I gotta make that clear before Space Ghost Perp just randomly appears in my bedroom and shoots me in the back of the head for claiming that anybody else was the original vamp. It was Jim Jones. But anyways, and thanks to a pretty healthy level of cosigns from people in Goth Money Records, Dick Diamonds would start to find a little bit of relevancy within Virginia before then branching out and hanging out with other underground rappers like Fat Nick, Smoke Perp, and Little Peep. During this period of time, many people would describe Diamonds on My Dick as a goth boy clique groupie, as he would often buy tickets to their shows, try to get around them as much as he could, and eventually actually ended up doing songs with quite a few members, which is kind of funny to think about considering the fact that Black Cray was heavily annoyed with Goth Boy Clique at this point, claiming that they completely ripped their entire aesthetic from his own group, Goth Money Records, and now we're running with it without giving him any form of credit whatsoever. Meanwhile, his very own cousin is trying to get around them and suck off of them for any form of clout that he can get, which I guess goes to show that water is thicker than blood, or maybe I said that wrong, but either way, dicks are definitely thicker than diamonds, am I right, boys? But either way, this period of time was pretty short-lived, as not long after that, Dick Diamonds would go on to start his own collective, known as Reptilian Club Boys, which is one of the most influential collectives in the entire underground, and probably has one of the most dedicated fan bases that I've ever seen. Because if you've ever wondered how the entire underground went from being mostly emo rappers in 2017 to a bunch of hyperpop and plug and B artists in 2021, I would say Reptilian Club Boys is kind of that missing piece because they really bridged the gap between the two genres. However, at first, the collective wasn't really anything all that impressive, mostly only being Dick Diamonds for the first couple months before he ended up meeting up with another very influential underground rapper going by the name of High C. Now, if you've never heard of High C before, you're honestly missing out, as he's one of the most important artists in the modern day underground, which I feel like I'm saying a lot in this video, but trust me, when it comes to High C, that's actually accurate. At some point in the near future, I'm going to do an entire deep dive into his whole career, so stick around for that. But for the purposes of today's video, all you really need to know is he was the heart and soul of the group. With him and Dick Diamonds going on to put out countless classic songs and mixtapes together during the years of 2017 to 2019, as well as expanding the collective even further to take in members like Little Shine, Cartier God, and Lil Kawhi, rest in peace. All artists that would go on to have a pretty successful solo career, which would only help to build the audience for the group even more, eventually forming an entire cult fan base around them. And while their audience was never able to grow to the level of somebody like the Suicide Boys or Opium, I would say that their fan base is a lot more dedicated, because even 5 years after the group formally disbanded, they're still interested in the artists involved and are continually talking about them. It's not very often that you see discourse about a rap group that was disbanded over half a decade ago, but a good chunk of that discourse is all about one member, and you can probably guess who. Diamonds on My Dick, as he's without a doubt the main reason why the group ended up falling apart in the first place, with him going down the entire checklist of shit that you shouldn't do if you're an underground rapper, talking to underage fans, abusing his ex-partners, having allegations of raping different women. On top of that, he was a serial scammer. I mean, he was so bad to the point that people actually started to care. In most cases, when artists scam in the underground, nobody really gives a fuck. It's basically part of the culture at this point, and it was especially not cared about back in 2019. However, it seems like Diamonds on My Dick was such an egregious scammer that he actually had entire Instagram pages made about him with attempts to expose his shitty behavior, which is something that I've only really seen with people like Jumix. On top of that, a random fan would end up calling him out on a live stream in front of his entire group, saying that he was a scammer and that they wanted their money back, and everybody ended up laughing about it. So apparently he was so well known for being a scammer that it was actually a running joke. However, they weren't laughing for long, because by the end of 2019, certain members would start to walk away, like Cartier God, Little Shine would end up leaving, and eventually High C would also announce that he was no longer going to be part of the group. And once he ended up leaving, the entire collective was practically dead. As after all, Reptilian Club Boys was more of a duo than anything. I mean, there was other members who were in the collective and were definitely prominent, but for the most part, if you were a fan of the group, you were a fan of High C and Dick Diamonds. So with his partner no longer in the picture and his entire collective falling apart, Dick Diamonds was put in kind of a bad spot. I mean, after all, at this point, he was 27 years old. He had never really worked a real job and had basically spent all of his 20s doing drugs and making music, which doesn't give you a lot of job opportunities. So, whether he wanted to or not, he really had no other choice but to continue to make music. Although you could tell that after 2020, his heart wasn't really in it anymore because it would take a noticeable dip in quality. However, while his music definitely took a pretty big hit, you could still tell that he had a love for the game, the scamming game, because he never really stopped scamming people. In fact, about 90% of the posts on the Reptilian Club Boys subreddit is all about Diamonds on My Dick either scamming or doing something weird or hanging out at the local Applebee's with Wings of Redemption eating Wendy's chili. Basically, the guy became a full-on lolcow. And eventually his name would become so tainted that he would no longer go under the moniker of Dick Diamonds and instead would change his name into Blood Rain, which honestly isn't anywhere near as cool. I think he should have stuck with Diamonds on My Dick. It's iconic at this point. Blood Rain sounds like some Playboy Cardi clone. But you know what? I get it. I mean, after all, you did a lot of scummy shit under the name of Diamonds on My Dick, and now you want to be a changed man. You want to be a new person. You're now like 33 years old, so it's time to grow up, and well, Blood Rain is the name that he's going to do it under. However, let's be honest, people like this never really change, and he's actually continued to scam his fans in the modern day. And well, that's what I'm going to be showing you right here. Because surprisingly, despite how well known he is for being a scammer, nobody's ever really done a video on it before. I mean, don't get me wrong, people have hinted at it before, and there's a whole running joke about how if you want to know what it feels like to be scammed in the underground scene, hit up Diamonds on My Dick because he'll scam you 100% of the time, guaranteed. But you know what, guys? Save your money, save your sanity, because today I'm going to give you the interactive experience of what it's like to be scammed by the infamous Dick Diamonds, Blood Rain, Black Cray cousin, whatever the fuck you want to call him. Let's get into the screenshots. So we actually have a more modern one here because all of this went down in May of 2025, with all of this kicking off with the fan in question responding to one of his stories, which most likely had something to do with the feature, saying what the placement fee's looking like. Diamonds on My Penis immediately responds by saying, I be working with Budget's twin. He says, shit, I got 50 on you right now. Shit, I'm down. Cash App? Yep. Also, like, are you sending me something with an open or am I sending you something? He then immediately sends the Cash App. Bro is fiending for that $50. He says, send me something, send me a screenshot of payment, please, and then I'm gonna send my email through. Bet I can do that. Bet, well, I guess send me a screenshot and then your email. At this point, the two of them are speed running this entire interaction, which is honestly kind of nice to see considering how many videos I've done on rappers who take forever to get anything done. The guy sends the money and then it takes like 5 months for one response, but Diamonds on My Dick wants that Applebee's money, so he's gonna do anything that he can to get it. It's kind of funny how all these underground artists are addicted to drugs and they do all these feature scams because they want to get a quick hit of whatever their poison is, whether it's weed, coke, heroin, Percocets, but then you got Diamonds on My Dick who just simply wants Applebee's. I mean, come on, that's kind of wholesome in a way. And well, he's gonna get that Applebee's because the guy ended up sending the $50. He then goes on to send the email, and just like that, the entire interaction is over. They both get what they want, and well, a new Diamonds on My Dick song is going to be released to the world. But of course, that didn't happen. Diamonds on My Dick goes on to respond, I bet, so I'm providing the beat too. I'm down, I just gotta hit the stew and cook this shit like a placement. Usually a producer sends me a beat that he wants me to rap on, you know, but I'm down to cook something for you. Nah, I feel ya. And honestly, that's even better. You're gonna get the beat, you're gonna get the verse, I mean production credit and artist credit from Diamonds on My Dick. For $50, that's definitely a pretty solid deal. He says, yeah, so give me a couple days, is that cool? He says, bet bruh, I fuck with that, bless. He says, bet, got you twin, but then he doesn't get a response for another 10 days. He says, yo, doesn't get a response, question mark. He says, hey, sorry, going to the studio today. I was only able to record a little last time I went. I haven't forgotten, bless bruh, all G. I ain't mean to be on your ass about it. I just some people I've worked with be on that BS. Then after that, I'm not really sure how much time goes by, but it seems like Dick Diamonds was once again trying to advertise features on his story because the guy ends up responding, where's mine at, gang? He doesn't get a a response, so he replies to another story saying, "Where my song?" He says, "Do you need me to send the opener a beat? Where my song?" I ain't trying to be annoying. I don't want to keep spamming your story. I know you see my shit. I'm just trying to get my song. Yo, do that again and I'ma block you. He then goes on to call him. And then he calls him over and over and over again. I mean, you're mad at him for spamming you, but then you're going on to spam him. It kind of seems a little hypocritical, I'm not gonna lie. And you know what they say, Dick Diamonds, hypocrisy is the greatest sin that you can possibly commit. Although the guy has allegedly fucked with underage girls, so that's probably a bit worse of a sin, but either way, hypocrisy, not good. After that, I have like 3 screenshots of him continually calling him over and over and over and over again. He tries to call him like 10 times. What could you possibly want? He goes on to finally reply saying, "Bruh, you said you would get back to me weeks ago. I'm just trying to get an update." Diamonds on My Dick then goes on to send a screenshot of the prior messages where he was spamming all of his stories saying, "Who does this? You're a weirdo. Nobody does that. You're weird, bro. Nobody responds to stories like that, weirdo. You're asking to get blocked." And this is honestly one of the funniest interactions that I've ever seen. He's so pressed that the guy ended up spamming his stories, but I mean, you're also spam calling him. And if you really feel like it's such a waste of time to respond to this guy, why are you taking like an entire hour to try to shit on him? Imagine you go to McDonald's, you pay for a hamburger, and you're like, "Hey man, can I get the burger? It's been a little bit of time. Can I get that burger? Hey," and they're like, "Hey, stop fucking saying you want the burger, okay?" And then they just like keep yelling at you, but during the time that they were yelling at you, they could have just simply made the burger and sent it to you. It's just weird. I mean, the guy is definitely out there, and honestly, considering this is really my first interaction with him, I gotta say, he seems pretty unhinged. He then says, "Block me, bruh. I ain't tripping over $50. How you expect motherfuckers to not spam you when you take their money and say nothing?" He says, "For all of that, you should have just politely asked me to block you instead of doing something stupid weird. Shit like that is weirdo. What the fuck, lol. Nah, block you cause you weird. Nobody does this, lol." Why is he so fucking pressed about getting spammed? Like, holy shit, dude. He goes on to send a bunch of crying emojis and says, "Calm down," which would honestly be my response. People do this to me all the time. I mean, this isn't really all that weird when it comes to Instagram. If people want your attention, they're gonna spam your stories. I'm assuming the reason that he's so pissed off is because he thought the people replying to his stories were people who wanted to buy new features from him so he could get more money and go to Applebee's. But instead, it's somebody who has the audacity to ask for what they paid for, which is completely out of pocket. I mean, what are you doing, you fucking weirdo? And then he keeps going on saying, "You not tripping, huh? I'm so confused. You replied to my single story. Your single time with single words. Top tier weirdo shit. But you not tripping?" Damn, Dick Diamonds, with bars like that, I don't know why you're not at the top of the rap game. You sending me single DMs. I want to fuck cement. Oh, okay, never mind. The guy then goes on to respond saying, "You might be tripping harder than me at this point, gang. If you jugging for features, just let me know. I'll leave you alone." And then he responds saying, "Gang, I don't even know you, lol. Please stop being a weirdo. That's all I ask. Stop being a weirdo. That's all." I can just imagine him standing there like, "Gang? How dare you call me gang? I don't know you, weirdo. Leave me alone," while he continually DMs him over and over again. The guy's basically ignoring you at this point. Why do you keep going? And honestly, I think I'm gonna cut it here because it actually keeps going for like 20 more screenshots where the guy just keeps saying like, "Can I get my feature?" And he's like, "No, you're weird. Why do you keep responding to my stories like that?" He keeps going and going and going and going. The guy is tripping hard. Surprisingly though, he never ended up blocking the guy, which is pretty rare for Diamonds on My Dick because he usually blocks everybody if they say even the slightest thing about him. But you know what? Maybe he's lonely. Maybe deep down he actually wants this fan to be his friend. When he said, "Why you calling me gang? I don't even know you," he probably meant deep down, "Gang, why aren't you trying to get to know me? Nobody really understands me. They always ask, 'Diamonds on my dick, why are you a scamming piece of shit?' They never ask, 'Diamonds on my dick, how are you?'" So you know what? I'm gonna ask in the video right now. Diamonds on my wiener, how you feeling today? Danny, how you feel? I feel great. But yeah, with all that said, that's basically all I have to say for today. Of course, Diamonds on My Dick never ended up sending him the song, which isn't even really surprising at this point. I mean, the dude is probably a more prolific scammer than even Young Simi, which is something that I never thought would be topped, but well, here we are. But with all of that said, that's my brief introduction to Diamonds on My Dick. I definitely will be covering many more artists within this realm in the near future, so stick around for that. If you enjoyed the video, want to see see more, hit that subscribe button. We recently passed 30K and I can't believe it. I'm still geeking off of that. Sorry there hasn't been as many videos in the past couple of days. It's been hot as fuck. I've been barely sleeping, and every time I try to record, I'm sweating my balls off. But we're here, we're outside, we're never stopping. I'm gonna keep you people updated. I got many more ideas on the horizon. And with that said, I will see you in the next one. Knife gang forever. Delete this gang. Peace out. Bye.